Alright, it's been a while, but we just ended with the crucifixion and all these mental gymnastics to try to make it mean something. Now let's get on to the resurrection to see what kind of evidence there is in this case. In some ways, the sheer power of Christ crucified almost makes it tempting to stop at the foot of the cross. Lots of people got crucified. I don't see how that's power. Okay, but as anyone familiar with the gospel knows, the story of Jesus of Nazareth by no means ends with his death and burial. We have to press on and ask the question, what about the resurrection? Why did the closest disciples of Jesus come to believe that he had been raised from the dead? And what did it mean for them as first century Jews to say that Jesus was resurrected? What is resurrection? One reason it is necessary to ask these questions is because in recent years there has been an extraordinary amount of confusion about what it means to say that Jesus of Nazareth raised from the dead. For some people, the resurrection of Jesus means that although he died on the cross, his spirit somehow lives on in the hearts of his followers. According to this point of view, whatever happened to Jesus' body in the tomb doesn't really matter. Other people, including a number of scholars who should know better, argue that the resurrection of Jesus means that his earliest followers believed that his spirit went to heaven after he died, that he was somehow exalted or taken up into the presence of God. People who hold this point of view tend to be ambiguous about exactly what happened to the body. They will often claim that it doesn't really matter. Still, others see the resurrection primarily as a kind of divine vindication of Jesus, by which God confirmed the truth of everything Jesus had said about himself. To what? Like 3 people, allegedly, who witnessed this empty... The lack of evidence is not... Wait, that one doesn't apply. But yeah, an empty cave doesn't prove anything. After all, ordinary people stay dead, except for Lazarus. Why should we believe anything different about the man from Nazareth? Lazarus, my bad. In this chapter, we will take up the question of the resurrection, given the limited space. Oh my God, what did he say that 25 times? Write a bigger book. Or if you need to write a series, write a series. You don't get to use the excuse like, oh, just believe it because I don't have enough room. We have infinite paper practically. Trees grow back. Yeah, you can write a really big book. Given the limited space we have, this can't, of course, be a comprehensive investigation. Instead, I want to stay focused on 2 basic questions. First, what did it mean for Jesus' disciples to claim that he had been raised from the dead? Second, why is it that so many Jews in the 1st century AD believed that Jesus really was raised from the dead? According to the Acts of the Apostles, you mean the people who killed sheep to get in favor with God? Like, who cares what they think? Clearly not the best resources in the world. Second, why is it that so many Jews... according to the Acts of the Apostles, within a couple years after Jesus' death, some 5,000 Jews came to believe in his resurrection. Well, where's their writing? Why don't we have 5,000 transcripts? So we have to believe a few people said 5,000 people. That doesn't mean there's evidence of 5,000. That means there's really evidence of 1. Acts of the Apostles, who was that? Paul, who never even met Jesus, I think. What was it that convinced them that the tomb of Jesus really was empty on Easter Sunday? How do we explain the historical fact that of the early Christian belief in the resurrection? What the resurrection is not. In order to understand what it means for the disciples of Jesus to have claimed that he was raised from the dead, it is crucial to clarify exactly what resurrection did and did not mean in a 1st century Jewish context. The smartest people in the world, the 1st century Jews. Otherwise, we can't even begin to discuss whether or not the resurrection of Jesus happened, much less why so many Jews came to believe that he had been raised. We'll begin by clearing the air and focusing on what the disciples did not mean when they claimed that Jesus had been resurrected. First, when the Jewish disciples of Jesus spoke about the resurrection, they were not claiming that he'd simply come back to ordinary earthly life. This is what we would call a resuscitation. Think here of the prophet Elijah raising the widow's son from the dead, or Jesus bringing Jairus' 12-year-old daughter back to life, or Lazarus. In all these cases, he was dead for 4 days. I guess he's more magic than Jesus. In all these cases, the person is miraculously brought back to life. Eventually, however, each one of them would die again. Is that in the Bible? Like, where's that fact written? Second, when the Jewish disciples of Jesus spoke about his resurrection, they were also not claiming that Jesus' soul or spirit was alive with God. This is perhaps, the most common mistake modern people make when they talk about the resurrection of Jesus. Many first century Jews believed that death was the separation of the soul from the body, and that the soul could live on in a state of immortality. See, these people didn't really understand how the brain works. So it's not surprising they were confused about reality and what life and death mean, and how they could be tricked by tiny little incidences and create a whole fabricated story about it. Like, yeah, it's not surprising. What's surprising is that people 2,000 years later aren't critical enough or don't know how to discern truth from fiction. Okay. Likewise, Jesus. For example, the Book of Wisdom declares the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and that their hope is full of immortality. Likewise, Jesus talks about... Is there a Book of Wisdom in the Bible? I don't remember that. Likewise, Jesus talks about how Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are still living, even though their remains of their bodies were still on earth and long since corrupted. But the disciples of Jesus were not just talking about the immortality of Jesus' soul. They did not go around proclaiming the spirit of Jesus is blah, 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 blah. This means that something happened to Jesus' corpse. Something... Because they didn't say something, is there written record of everything they said? Because maybe they did say that. Instead, they went around proclaiming the resurrection of Jesus' body. This means... Okay. Oh, gosh. Finally... When Jesus' followers spoke about the resurrection, they were not claiming that he was exalted to heaven after he died. It is remarkable how popular some form of this idea has become nowadays, especially among scholars. I mean, are they really scholars if they can't even pick through fact and fiction? Who do not believe in Jesus' bodily resurrection. Nevertheless, this idea is literally dead wrong. I think he means... metaphorically. It is true that the Gospels and the book of Acts describe Jesus ascending into heaven to be seated at the right hand of God. Mark 16, Luke 24, Acts 1. But the ascension of Jesus into heaven clearly takes place after his bodily resurrection. In other words, the resurrection of Jesus and his ascension into heaven are two different events, neither of which was written about for many decades. This distinction is particularly clear in the account of Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene. Yeah, and remember, never mind. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to him, Teacher. Jesus said to her, Do not hold me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am descending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Notice there is a clear distinction here between the resurrection of Jesus and from the tomb and the ascension into heaven. The resurrection has to do with what happened to Jesus' dead body as it lay in the tomb. The ascension has to do with what happened to Jesus' living body after it exited the tomb. You want to see a cool ascension? Check out David Blaine. The resurrection and the ascension are not two ways of describing the same event. Alright, let's save the rest for next time. Almost there, guys, and it doesn't go to the end, so... Yep, almost done.